I'd be happy to. My name is Clifford Larsen. I was born in New Orleans in the United States. I studied law in the United States, in Germany, in the United Kingdom, and in France. I was admitted to the bar of New York and to the bar of Louisiana, and as avocat à la Cour de Paris in France. I practiced corporate law in New York City and in Paris. After some time practicing, I decided to become a law professor and then established some international exchange programs and an LLM program. And since 2006, I have been the founding and only dean so far of the Bucerius Master of Law and Business program. I was practicing law in Paris when I was approached about teaching on the side, both in American summer programs in Paris and at a French law school. And although I enjoyed my practice of law very much, I really found that I enjoyed working with students even more. So I then inquired about teaching positions full-time and eventually became a full-time professor in the United States. And that has been over 20 years since I've taken that position, and since then I've been a full-time law professor. First, I'd like to say what my approach not is. I'm not there to have students memorize particular statutes or case law results, because much of what the students will learn may very well be out of date by the time the students eventually go into legal practice. I'm also not there to have the students think the same way I do when they come out of law class with me. I'm there to help them establish their own abilities to take knowledge and information that they gain and to apply it to particular factual situations. So in the short term, I'm there to allow students or to motivate students or to help students achieve the goal of taking legal knowledge and applying it to new factual situations, and perhaps go beyond the legal knowledge they have into areas in which legal knowledge has not yet become very well established. In the medium to long term, I'm there to help them represent their clients. That is a skill that I think is often lost in law teaching, of the importance and the value and the dignity, if you will, of a lawyer working with a client to help that client achieve its goals and to help make sure that the legal process functions correctly. Getting students engaged in class is indeed a skill that one has to develop, and I think there are lots of ways to do that. The fundamental principle, of course, is that students are more engaged and are more likely to really identify with and to be enthusiastic about the material if one gets them involved with it. Now, in a very simple way, that can mean a very active class discussion, to be asking questions, to require that the students, in principle, be ready to discuss issues with you that you have told them in advance would be on the agenda for that particular day. But it goes beyond that as well. It can be moot court exercises within a class. It can be acting as a judge. It can mean telling the students that they have to draft a law so that they can see what difficulties the legislature has in resolving certain legal issues. It means getting the students involved personally to bring their skills and knowledge into the class discussion and to the exercises, rather than simply going, having professor present some material and have the students absorb it and go home and learn it. It also means being prepared to go away from one's class discussion and notes, and to be prepared to pick up ideas from the class and go with those in the class, and not always stay strictly with one's PowerPoint slides or one's notes or presentation that have been prepared in advance, but to make it an active environment in which the students can bring in their own experience and the students of their classmates who often have a different background, and then can add greatly to class discussion that way. There are obviously lots of skills that go into being a law professor, but I'll focus on two. And one is to enjoy working with students and with the material one has. If one doesn't enjoy working with students, then being a professor, any type of professor, is not the right job for you. If you don't really look forward to walking into class and to interacting with people, especially with young people, then it's not, again, the appropriate job. The same goes with the material. If you're not enthusiastic about the material that you're teaching, it can be a very difficult job. But if you enjoy it and understand it and look forward to exchanging ideas about it, that makes it very worthwhile and makes, in principle, a good teacher if you really enjoy what you're doing. The second skill, if you want to call it that, is to be prepared substantively and pedagogically. The obvious preparation, substantive preparation, is something that I think most professors have. They know their material quite well. In addition to that, however, one has to consider how one best brings this material over to the students. There are different types of material that can be taught in different ways, and it requires time and probably some trial and error to get the right approach for different types of material. And that is a second skill, if you will, along with the desire to work with young people and with a particular subject matter that I think are fundamental in making a professor or putting a professor in a position to really work well with students. I don't know if there are any secrets, but there are maybe some thoughts that I can share in that respect. One is to be prepared to learn from the students. Yes, one goes into class well prepared, but especially if you're working with international students, as I have the great pleasure of doing, one always learns, and one should always be learning from one's students. If they are really involved in the material, they will present some ideas or perspectives that you as an individual probably have never thought of before. Welcome the opportunity. This gives you a chance to learn from them and to also to convey the enthusiasm that you probably have for your own material. Another skill, and this is really more of a skill, is the idea of knowing when to let discussion become very prominent and when to stop it. It's always an issue. Some professors allow very little discussion that I think can be very boring for the students. Some professors let discussion go on so far or so long that the students lose the thread of what they're trying to do in the class. And it's a skill to know how to lead the discussion, when to start it, when to stop it, and how to guide it along the way so that everybody has something from it. In these types of discussions, again, one can use different pedagogical tools. One thing I do is often we'll team teach with another professor. We'll both be in the room at the same time, and we can discuss things back and forth. And that also is something that I think the students like a lot. Finally, remember that lawyers and law professors have somewhat different jobs, but the law professors are there also to show what it means to be a legal counselor and how important it is, and also the great satisfaction and fulfillment that comes from working with clients and helping them achieve their goals that often gets lost in the academy, in law teaching generally. And if you can bring that across to the students, you can show to them what it's like and how important it is that a lawyer function well for the client. That is indeed something that is very fulfilling, and it can help motivate our students to become better professionals. Law professors today, often in terms of technology, are far behind their students. The students are part of the digital native generation, and they can deal with technology much better than the law professors can. Technology is not a cure-all for all pedagogical issues, but law professors should be open to the idea of using technology and actively explore the different technological options for making their classes more available to the students, whether it be whether having podcasts or whether it means filming their lectures or being open to doing that. One should be open to these ideas rather than simply rejecting them and saying it takes too much time to get involved. That, again, is not to say that these things are a cure-all. The motivation that comes from being a law professor, that is probably more important than any particular technical skill that one can have. But being open to these different possibilities is certainly helpful, and certainly moving away from merely lecturing, from reading class notes that have become yellowed with age. That is not, I think, appropriate for this day and age. The professors have to be ready to reach out to the students, to get them actively involved in the class discussions. Even in a very large group, one can ask 2 or 3 people to comment on a particular topic, and it doesn't mean that everyone has to be involved, but it creates an atmosphere of involvement, and I think that's very important as well. It helps, again, you can be ready. Even if a student asks a question you can't answer, you have to be open to that. You can be prepared and say, wow, that's a great question. I've never thought of it that way. We can talk about it now, or we can. I'll get back to you with an answer in the next class session. But being willing to discuss things, to be open, maybe to even admit in certain instances that you don't have an answer, but you're willing to come back to the students on that issue. I think all those things help. But again, the primary skills that that will help make one a good teacher, a good professor, is the desire to work with students, interest in the material, and substantive and pedagogical preparation. There was indeed one professor during law school who I would certainly say became a mentor and a role model to me, both in class and outside of class. In class, this individual was well-informed and enthusiastic about his material, and outside of class, he was always available. And when I applied for a particular grant, he worked with me. I thought I had written a good draft in the first draft, and 9 drafts later, I was still working on it because he kept coming back at me and saying, it's not good enough, it's not good enough. And he took his time to work with me closely and to help me achieve a level of writing that I had not achieved before then. So it comes from the personal readiness to work closely with students, perhaps to sacrifice some of one's personal time to do that. And I was the fortunate recipient of that personal attention, and I hope that since becoming a professor, I've been able to give that kind of personal attention to my students as well.